Shalom all, by the time that you will see this, I will hopefully be in Finland, as it was filmed yesterday. And today I'd like to look outward at a few countries around the world and see what's going on there and possibly how it affects Israel. So let's start in Europe with the Netherlands. Geert Wilders, the leader of the Conservative Party, PVV, which last election got the most votes but still needed to form a coalition to create the government, just resigned his party from the coalition, which of course will cause for new elections to happen shortly, citing that his immigration and asylum reform were stalled due to his own coalition with a more central party stopping it from advancing. Mr. Wilders said that he is unwilling to remain part of the government and watch the Netherlands' downfall. I'll add to it that Geert Wilders is a very strong supporter of Israel, and I hope that in the coming elections he will gain even more electoral power and hopefully reach a place where he doesn't even need to form a coalition, but I don't expect that to happen. In Poland, there was just recently elections, and a conservative party and a conservative president were elected. Generally, in this day and age, I'm in favor of conservative rise to power across the globe. It's never 100% good versus evil, but it seems that with Islam and globalism and liberalism and legacy media and lawfare and so on, generally it seems that conservatives of the world seem more founded in Abrahamic biblical morals and common sense and the survival of their own countries. Although it's not entirely true, as most Islamic countries certainly would be considered conservative. So when I say conservative around the world, I mean Western conservative, not Islamist conservative. And even that isn't always a net positive. I mean, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, is certainly a conservative. And I am not so sure that I would put him on the right side of the moral map of the world. Speaking of Russia, let's quickly jump to Ukraine. The Ukraine launched a massive drone attack on 5 Russian airbases, destroying 41 fighters and bombers. This may change the face of warfare forever. First of all, the cost of drones are very low compared to the cost of airplanes. Already, we saw with the Houthis facing the United States and with Israel facing Hezbollah that Israel and the United States have been forced to use much more expensive air defense systems to take out the cheap drones. And consequently, the US Navy started using the ship's guns to target the drones. But that, of course, is much more dangerous, as the range is smaller and thus the reaction window is quite limited. Additionally, other forms of defense are being researched and developed, such as laser options. So we'll see what's going on. But for the past decades, air superiority, in other words, the air forces of countries, was critical for defeating land armies. Note, though, that this isn't as effective when used by Western armies that restrain themselves in urban warfare against non-government entities, in other words, terrorists. But this could be a game changer, as it decimated dozens of planes using methods that are cheap and can be smuggled into the country in range of the enemy bases. Some of these attacks at bases took place thousands of kilometers from the Ukrainian border. I dread to think if such an effort were used against Israel. Moving on, in South Korea, 6 months after the political storm that happened there when the president declared martial law and following that was impeached, and that impeachment was ratified by the Constitutional Court, they just had elections, and the leftist party, which is much closer to China, much more liberal, and so on, won the elections and will be president and have the majority in the parliament, although this was a presidential election, so them having a majority in the parliament is not yet guaranteed, for the next 5 years. And while I'm not too knowledgeable about the candidate, as I just previously said a little bit about leftism and conservatism, any candidate that is supported by legacy media, which in this case they do, I would keep an eye on them and see what's going on, because I don't trust legacy media, so if they support them, then the friend of my enemy may be my enemy as well. But we will see, and in any case, pray for South Korea to survive these changes well. Now, as you know, I like to tour the world and then come back towards home, so let's move back towards Syria. And there are a couple of interesting reports out of Syria. The first is that President Jolani will be visiting the United States in September. Who would have believed that a former ISIS jihadist would be invited to the White House? Very interesting. And on Tuesday, there were missiles fired from the Golan into Israel. Anecdotally, or as a side note, I was watching a play of Fiddler on the Roof as the sirens went off, and the cast in the play, which were made aware of the sirens by a few notes of phones and possibly an earpiece or something, really played it well. And it was exactly when the the Tsarist soldier came to Netivyah to tell him that trouble was coming. And then the siren went off and Netivyah said, "Sirens?" And then they said, "No, but those are in Tel Aviv." And then corrected, "No, it's in the Golan." It was very funny, very well done. But anyways, missiles came into Syria from the Golan, and the army responded, shelling the locations where the strikes came from, as well as airstriking some armed depots in the area. But the most interesting thing about this is a very interesting report by Syrian media of this event. And the way it was reported is that missiles were launched from our side to their side. And this is maybe just a nuance, but it's an important one. As for the last 58 years since 1967, our side was called by them the occupied Golan Heights, and referring to it not as the occupied Golan Heights, but as Israel's side, is quite a dramatic event on its own. And maybe that kind of thing is why al-Jolani is being invited to the White House in September. And back around to Gaza. We're getting daily reports that are coming out solely from Hamas and then echoed by legacy media, which you can tell from today's video that I'm not a fan of, about massacres outside or nearby the new food distribution centers. These, of course, are false. One has only to consider the source, Hamas. Known liars, take the fake attacks on hospitals and the Jenin wars and so on and so forth, who have everything to gain by lying and nothing to lose. Heck, they have everything to gain by the deaths of their own civilians as well, but that's another story. Even the media, which is immediately echoed the claims as gospel truth, are starting to backtrack. The Washington Post printed a retraction and deleted the original article, and even the incredibly biased BBC aired on one of its many channels an investigative program that concluded that the footage spread by Hamas could not have been taken where they claimed it was. But unfortunately, once the lies go out, it is nearly impossible to take them back. Kind of like a toothpaste out of a tube. Getting it back in just doesn't work. Which is why the media is failing at its job and its responsibility by spreading fake news they almost assuredly know is false, or at least lacks credible sources. There's a quote in Hebrew: "While the lie has raced halfway around the world, the truth is still lacing up its shoes." So just remember to be astute and critical of the media that echoes Hamas lies. Shalom, and I'll see you all in a couple of weeks. God bless you.